our welcome everyone to our December 11th meeting of CS Bars, and probably the last one for this year, depending on how our conversation goes. Wanted to start off first by referencing that Dr. Bolton will be joining only by audio. He will not have his video on for this meeting. And if we could ask staff to do our roll call, please.
Lisa Nemescla,
Here.
Dr. James Bolton. Dr. James Bolton.
Did you hear me?
Yes. Thank you. Jake Ripper,
Present.
William Hunt,
Present.
Paul Kramer,
Present.
Kevin Marshall,
Present.
Philomena Yarosha.
Present.
All right, we have a quorum.
Thank you. We can now call for public comment. Members of the public can make written public comments submitted to the csbars at calbar.ca.gov email box. Written public comments were received and distributed to CS Bars members already. Verbal public comments of up to 3 minutes will now be taken. First, recognizing any individuals who have signed up in advance using the link on the agenda. No person has signed up in advance. Or if you wish to now by raising your hand using the raise hand function on your computer or **9 on your phone. Do we have anyone who would like to make public comment?
We do have one individual. I will recognize now Bob Anderson.
Thank you.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, thank you. Yes, good afternoon. I appreciate the opportunity to speak. And I just want to basically commend the efforts so far of the folks at the Chief Trials Office for formally extending investigations into some of the corrupt individuals colluding with Scientology, issuing bogus criminal charges. I look forward to the outcome of this investigation. And I thank you all for your time, for hearing me out. And just know that we have not forgotten of all the corrupt individuals actively colluding, issuing bogus criminal charges, threatening to intimidate and harass activists, trying to end the cult of Scientology. So thank you for your time, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Is there any additional public comment?
No further. No. Oh, just a moment. No further. The hand that I thought I saw was Mr. Anderson, who just completed his comment. Thank you.
So thank you for the public comment that we have received. I'll move on to our first agenda item, Chief's Chair's report. First reminder, as we had discussed prior, if everyone can please keep your camera on, other than the one exception we already discussed at the beginning of our meeting. And please make an announcement by raising your hand before leaving if you plan to be out of the camera for more than a few minutes. And I would appreciate that. Next, for the remaining 2025 CS Bars meetings through August will take place on Wednesday. So to make sure we all are aware of that instead of our normal Tuesday. So from now on going forward on Wednesdays to allow maximum staff support for those members and members of the public attending in person especially for the January upcoming meeting. I was asked to briefly recap. We had a diversity summit last Wednesday. There were a large number of participants. From my count, a little over 130. I thought it was a very good panel discussion. We had one panel that was focused on diversity in employment, and we had another panel that was focused on diversity in our legal education. If everyone had not participated, I would definitely encourage you to look at the slide materials. There's some interesting data presented to us that I had not seen previously, showing the life cycle comparison of the student population to the California population to the bar member population, and a new area I've not seen prior are people that are members of the bar leaving the bar for reasons other than retirement and what percentage of each subpopulation that was. So I thought it was very fascinating information. I would encourage everyone, if you can, to look at that, participate on that. There's also a conversation at the very end concerning the DEI SEAL program that we'll talk about later today. I think sometimes we often forget that law schools are employers of lawyers, and thus we would qualify for the DEI SEAL program, which I definitely encourage everyone to participate in. And then finally, just to recap, we had our CBE meeting last Friday, so it's been a busy week. In the CBE, I was asked to recap on our prior November and October CS SPARS meeting. So I did my best to, in a very short format, discuss the highs and lows of different issues that were raised on the rules as they were presented. And our staff member, Mr. Hunanian, also presented on that, and I think he did a very excellent job with Natalie Leonard and their write-up prior to that. So if you have not reviewed that, I'd also encourage you to review that. That would be it for me for our chair's report. So I'll turn over to our director's report now.
Great. Thank you so much, Chair. This is Cody Hunanian in the Office of Admissions. I have a few updates we want to report on. First, I wanted to start by acknowledging a letter that we received, a sign-on letter by at least several law school deans at California accredited law schools regarding the California bar exam experiment phase 1. First, I want to acknowledge that we appreciate the feedback. We've received feedback on a variety of issues recently from our law school stakeholders, as well as students and others, and it's incredibly valuable. This letter that we've received highlighted a couple of issue areas that law school deans noted with relation to the experiment. And that leads me to my second update, which is we wanted to provide information in this forum about some of the steps that have been taken to address some of those concerns. Many of them were steps already in the works due to the data that we've analyzed from the experiment. But we want to make sure that this information reaches you all as our law school leaders and also the students that you represent. So I'll point to the Committee of Bar Examiners meeting from Friday, December 6th, for those who want to see some more information about the California bar exam experiment. But for the purpose of today's update, we wanted to share some of the actions that have been taken. And I want to start first with addressing some of the technical issues that were reported. We've done a lot to analyze the data available to us, and we really honed in on computer equipment related issues being one of the primary drivers of some of the challenges a small but notable number of test takers faced. And what's being instituted for the February 2025 bar exam are mandatory mock exams prior to the test and mandatory computer equipment tests prior to the February exam. Again, looking at the data available to us, we believe that a large number of the issues that some applicants face would have been addressed by these two requirements. We also shared at Friday's meeting survey results from our own internal survey of test takers. While those numbers showed overall across the entire population general satisfaction, we did point out that among those test takers who were unable to complete the exam, the experimental exam, there was a high level of dissatisfaction amongst that group. We have been working with Measure Learning, the exam vendor, to address some of those support-related issues. We have assurances from them that they will be increasing their support staff to improve response time, and they're going to be utilizing their most experienced proctors for the February exam. So we really think those two actions address some of the issues that were raised by some students, whether it was wait time or the quality of the support that they received. I know I've heard from several law schools and students as well about some of the tools and functionalities related to the experimental exam. Heading into February, we will be adopting a whiteboard option as a as something to replicate physical scratch paper. We will be updating our FAQ documents and updating students with all of these changes. But to summarize that, what students will be able to have in the remote testing environment is an 8.5 by 11 whiteboard where they can which they can use essentially as scratch paper, but it can be erased at the end of the exam, and we know that there's not an exam security risk there. And lastly, we going into the experiment, I think recognized that some of our communications can be beefed up. So as we look towards February 2025, our FAQ document is really going to provide more information about kind of technical guidance related to computer equipment, more information about the suite of software that's downloaded for the exam delivery platform, and just frankly, just communicating to students a lot of the lessons that we've learned from the experiment to get ahead of some of the questions that we anticipate. So the FAQ document is updated kind of regularly, but as we get closer to the exam, we'll be also reinstituting our weekly countdown email and thinking about other ways to just make sure that this important information is front and center. So we'll communicate with our law school stakeholders when there's new documentation and updates to help get that word out there. But we're really going to be leaning on our own communication efforts to share a lot of this information as well. And then lastly, we've been bringing to these meetings a lot of resources that are available to students. Recently, I think we've promoted some of the State Bar's own programs, whether it was the Bar Stories program or the Retaker support group. Today, we wanted to point out a free resource from the California Lawyers Association. This is a reminder that memberships are free for law students, along with 2 memberships to sections within the California Lawyers Association. And also, membership is free for new lawyers within their first 3 years of practice. So we just want to bring some of the external resources that are of interest to your students and put a spotlight on those in today's discussion. So that's it for me. Thank you so much for the opportunity to give an update.
Thank you. I will now turn to our staff report with Natalie Leonard.
Can I ask a question first?
Please.
Yep.
So Cody, the whiteboard, is that a virtual whiteboard or a physical whiteboard?
That's a good question. So the exam platform has a digital notepad, and during the experiment, that was the only place that notes can be taken. Some of the early feedback we received from students was that they still would like to have something closer to a physical scratch paper. So in collaboration with Measure Learning, they helped us identify a solution that other remote exams utilize, which is a whiteboard. So it's a physical whiteboard. Applicants can use multiple color dry erase and kind of replicate a scratch paper environment on that whiteboard, but it then ensures at the end of the exam, the proctor can guarantee that that information is erased. And so they're not taking with them any information from the exam. So that will be on top of the digital notepad that already exists within the platform.
And so remote test takers will be told how they can purchase one of these things if they want it? Or
Yes,
was that only for in-person?
I'm sorry, say it again, Paul.
Was that only for in-person proctored exams?
No, so remote test takers will be able to use one of these whiteboards in their space. Really, I think the only limitation at this point is the size. So it's about the size of a paper. It's 8.5 by 11 inches, which can be purchased out. That's a common size. For test takers in person, there will be, as I understand it now, whiteboards available provided by the test center. I think our current FAQs addresses the ability for someone in a remote setting to bring their whiteboard, but I think we're currently crafting more clear language about what test center in-person test takers should expect as far as what will be provided from the test center. So that will be one update to make.
Okay, thanks.
No problem.
Dean Amesqua, you have a question?
Yes, thank you. So Cody, in relation to the practice exam and or the testing of equipment that you referenced prior to the exam, will there be any support available to address issues that happen during those events for the students that are trying to ensure that their system is correctly, set up to take the exam?
Yeah, so let me provide some clarity about those two tests because I think will help answer the question. There is the mock exam, and what's good about that opportunity is that an applicant will go into the test platform just as they would during the exam, including the fact that a proctor will be there at that time, so they will be able to really be exposed to the full experience of not only getting into the waiting room, but also doing the identity check, and then also getting into an exam with a live proctor with a full connection. So that will really provide confirmation that they're kind of able to fully get into the system. Then there will be the mandatory computer equipment test, and that is on the Measure Learning website. You'll be able to go there. It'll let you know that your computer equipment meets all of the minimum system requirements, which I didn't note, but we've increased the minimum system requirements to ensure that when an applicant gets a positive, that their computer is able to meet the requirements of the platform, that there's like they're well within a stable range, so there's no issues. So they'll get kind of a confirmation in that equipment test. If there is an issue with a piece, with maybe their RAM or their internet bandwidth, they'll be notified which issue it is. And so some solutions may be something that an applicant has to take care of themselves. So you can imagine if your computer just doesn't have enough RAM, you may need to get another piece of equipment, or you may need to test in person. But if you are doing the mandatory mock exam and your proctor just tells you, hey, your space just doesn't meet these requirements, they'll have an opportunity to kind of interface with the proctor and get that information before exam day. And then lastly, I should say, if through either of these experiences, a test taker has difficulty, because of the way the experiment was set up, where this wasn't mandatory, there was any tech issues that arose were having to be resolved kind of in real time, which is really difficult. The mandatory mock exam will need to be done prior to the exam, and I don't have that date yet, but that'll give a window for an applicant to work with Measure Learning's tech support, or to work with our staff, or to just get a new piece of equipment to try to resolve that issue before exam day. And that wasn't something that was really able to be done for the experiment.
Thank you.
No problem.
And seeing no other hands up, thank you. And we'll now turn to our staff report with
Thank
Natalie.
you.
Oh, you're muted.
There we go. Thanks, Dean Frickberg. So I just wanted to continue to reiterate, and we'll bring this up, each time, that the State Bar now offers a retaker support group for those individuals that are retaking the bar exam. They are automatically invited to do so when they register. Once their application is approved, they will receive an email invitation to join this group. There is no cost to do so. It meets weekly for 5 sessions. So the program has already started, but people can still register if they have not yet. It's a combination of mindset strategies as well as substantive content strategies. It was offered for the first time back in July. It's being in conjunction with the July bar exam. It's being offered again now in conjunction with the February bar exam. And this program has been updated to address that this bar exam will be administered in remotely or at test centers. That there are questions that are designed by Kaplan And it also incorporates a significant amount of feedback provided not only by CS bars, but by the Law School Council in terms of the things that you encouraged as far as naming and content as well. So we really seek your help in continuing to reach out to your alumni who are planning to retake the bar exam in February to help amplify our message, and also to let folks know that haven't joined yet that it's not too late. We encourage them to take advantage and have this be a part of and complement their other bar their bar study strategy. We don't yet have studies related to the results because it was only offered for the first time in conjunction with the July bar exam, but our other intervention, the Bar Strategies and Stories program, has performed very positively, and we're hoping for similar type of results here. So we welcome your feedback and help in amplifying the message, and we also will continue to welcome your feedback as to the content, not only from the student evaluations that we will solicit, but also from what you hear as well. So we thank you for being a partner in this effort, and we're pleased to invest in this effort that we can offer to your graduates at no charge. Are there any questions or suggestions or comments that you've heard from your applicants regarding this program? Okay, I think we're ready to proceed.
Thank you. So we'll now turn to our item 3.2, report on the diversity SEAL program that I mentioned in my opening comments.
Thank you. As part of that, I'd like to recognize Danielle McCrae from our State Bar Office of Access and Inclusion. And we'll ask Danielle if she would like us to recognize Elizabeth Hom as well, our ANI Director. Danielle, would you like us to recognize Elizabeth as well?
I think Elizabeth is just viewing. She's not planning to participate as I understand it, but if there's questions that we have specifically for her, I know she's kind of on hand.
Okay, and then maybe also bring in Andrea Funk from the Colleges of Law, which is a SEAL recipient. We'll be hearing from Danielle and then actually from Dean Frickberg and also Dean Andrea Funk from the Colleges of Law. So welcome, Danielle. Thank you for joining us.
Of course, happy to be here. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I have a very brief PowerPoint to walk us through this conversation. But yes, I am here to give a brief program overview and update on the State Bar's DEI Leadership SEAL program. So this is a program that the State Bar launched in January of 2023, and it is a program that is available to all legal employers that employ California attorneys. So that can be law firms, in-house departments, law schools, nonprofits, government agencies, and so forth. And what this program is there's a list of 10 action items, DEI best practices, and an employer must commit to pursuing at least 5 of that list of 10 action items to be part of this program. So in making that commitment to implementing 5 or more of these action items, an employer can be recognized as a participating committed employer, after which point the employer then has up to a year to actually implement those action items in their workplace. Those employers that implement 5 or more action items are then recognized as a SEAL recipient. And so they quite literally get a little leadership seal that I had here on the first slide. We have a bronze, silver, and gold version of that. So employers that implement 5 or 6 action items are bronze tier recipients. Those with 7 or 8 are silver tier, and those that implement 9 or 10 are gold tier recipients. So they receive that seal from us that they can use on print and web materials to signal to potential employees, potential organizations, clients that they might work with, that DEI is an important, valuable part of their organization. And they're also listed and recognized on the State Bar website and get invited to various State Bar programs like the Diversity Summit that Dean Frickberg mentioned earlier. And this is what our participating employers look like by sector right now. So like I said, it is open to employers really across the legal sector, but we have a majority of our participants right now are in the private bar, law firms of really all sizes, many nonprofits. Several of those are state bar, legal aid grantees, so nonprofits that are providing free civil legal aid to low-income indigent Californians, various government agencies, and then we do have currently 4. There's one in the blue part of that bar in the implemented space, but there wasn't quite enough room for the data label. So there's 4 law schools currently participating in the program, and those included colleges of law, which is why Dean Funk is here with us today, and then also University of West Los Angeles, where Dean Frickberg is representing. And just for those that are less familiar with the program, this is what our list of action items looks like. So the actual application materials give more information about what is specifically required for each, but to give you a flavor of what we ask employers to do as part of this program. The first 2 action items are actually required in building out this program. They felt particularly foundational to the rest of this work. And so regardless of bronze, silver, or gold tier status, those first 2 need to be in the list of action items that an employer is committing to and implementing as an employer. But other action items include things like calculating staff turnover and promotions by demographic characteristics, creating and sharing publicly a DEI statement, surveying staff, incorporating and integrating DEI responsibilities into leadership team members' job duties, and so forth. And I am keeping it brief today, so I will just point you to a couple other resources if you want to learn more about this program. The State Bar website has a whole webpage dedicated to this program, on which there's also an FAQ available, a resource guide that provides some information to employers about how to implement the various action items or things to keep in mind when they're implementing those action items. And also much of the work of this program and the idea of this program, and this desire to build a program that required and encouraged employers to implement these best practices came out of the calls to action from the diversity report card of 2022, I believe, maybe 21. So those calls to action kind of morphed into this list of best practices that then became the action items for the Leadership Seal program. So all of that is on the State Bar website, and also wanted to mention for your law schools or other employers, the next application window is launching January next month and closes in March. So our annual cycle is right at the top of each calendar year. So I'm happy to answer any questions about the program itself, but then otherwise I think I am turning over to the deans to talk about their experience with the program.
And while people are assembling their questions, I'll also just point out that in the accredited rules, there is now a DEI requirement under 4.160C. And so a law school, particularly an accredited law school that takes part in this program, should include that participation as part of their DEI plan. Looks like we are ready to turn it to Dean Frickberg, please.
Well, I'll talk shortly and then turn over to Dean Funk. I think one of the things that I like to flag, and I mentioned this in the opening, that we often forget that law schools are employers of lawyers. Not only are we training lawyers, but our faculty is primarily, if not exclusively, lawyers, and the majority of staff and administrators as well. So I think that we could always evidence to our students and community the same values we have and we ask our lawyer graduates to have. Another very interesting one that I don't hear echoed enough is, who's one of the major Gold Star recipients for the DEI seal? The State Bar of California. So the State Bar of California is also an employer of lawyers, and they've gone through this process as well. And the last part I would echo, I would argue that the State Bar's accreditation of law schools and allowing registered unaccredited schools is great evidence of their DEI policies. because we see a higher proportion of underrepresented communities, and especially first generation law students in these categories for accredited schools and registered schools. So I think it's just a great program, and I would encourage everyone to participate. And again, it can only help and as we go through that process. So I'll turn over to Dean Funk.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Danielle, and Natalie for inviting me to speak. The Colleges of Law has participated in the SEAL program for the past 2 years. And, we decided to do it because, as Dean Frickberg alluded to, the Cal schools exist really to, I think, primarily help to diversify the legal profession. And our agenda at the Colleges of Law is to do exactly that. That is our mission. And our initiative, we call our DI initiative, we call Access, Belonging, and Community. And we have a council that works towards that end. So our work on the council has had significant impact on actually the student experience by educating the community on relevant issues, by fostering relationships among and between our diverse student body, the people in our student body, and supporting administration, staff, and faculty who connect with and represent the student body. I can't tell you how many times our students say, it is so nice to see a faculty member from my community, someone who looks like me. That is really important to our students. We are very intentional and mindful about our students' educational experience, and it has paid off in terms of retention and student learning. When we share that we have received this recognition by the State Bar, it makes a difference to applicants and to the new student body at orientation, because they see that they're impacted by it, because they see that we are standing behind the words that we are committed to diversity. We are actually doing the work. So how we went about doing it is, quite honestly, I have to commend the access and inclusion team, because the first year we were all learning a lot of things. Again, as Dean Frickberg said, we don't think about law schools as having lawyers, and yet almost all of us are. So, we had to think about it as, who are our faculty? What do they look like? What are the people who are running the school? What do they look like? And so the team, the Access and Inclusion team, were excellent at answering questions as we were navigating this field of how does a law school qualify as an employer, and how does that look? How do you make it happen? How do you qualify for those action items? So my tips for you in doing it is to look at what you're already doing. I bet there are things that you are already doing that you either need to just memorialize, that you need to create a policy on, that you need to put into writing. Figure out where the gaps are. And that was where we started. We realized that we had probably half of the things just right off the bat. And could we memorialize or put into writing the rest? Our first year, we had 8 of the 10 action items. The other 2 we did in practice, but we didn't have them written down. So we needed to do that. So my second piece of advice is document what you're doing. Document so that you can then show not just the State Bar, but your community. I have to tell you, I think it's worthwhile, worth every moment of time to participate in this program, because, as I said, we went back when I announced at orientation and put up that gold seal on the, in the PowerPoint slide, they clapped. The students were very excited to be attending a school who was, again, doing the work that they said they were doing. So with that, I will turn it back and just appreciate the opportunity to share our experience.
Thank you. And I just want to echo what Dean Funk was saying. It definitely rang true for our process for UWLA going through this. I was very surprised it didn't require a lot of effort so far on us, except documentation. You know, it was taking what we do, what we live, and then writing it down and presenting it. So we didn't really have to change ourselves institutionally. We just had to document what we've been doing. And thus, I didn't see a high cost to doing this as long as we're doing what we say we do, you know, which is ultimately, hopefully, we all are as we go through that process. So with that, any questions, any comments from our committee members? Okay. Not hearing any. Again, thank you for the presentation. I think it's a great effort, and that's why we are here. That's why the CS Bars is here, and that's why our schools are here. So I think it's a very good thing. And with that, I'll move on to our next area. We have nothing for a committee report, but we do have our minutes. Again, our minutes have already been dispersed to all committee members. With that said, is there any motion to adopt or discussion to correct the proposed minutes as received?
I move to adopt. This is Philomena Yurashek.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
And with that second being twice received, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Scott,
Aye.
Dr. James Bolton,
Yes, aye.
William Hunt,
Yes.
Paul Kramer, Paul Kramer, Kevin Marshall,
Yes.
Paul votes yes.
Philomena Yurashek,
Yes.
Chair for.
Yes.
All right.
And with that, we move on to the business of the day. So moving to section 7, we'll have a discussion on the Committee of Bar Examiners Unaccredited Law School rules reviewed and proposed revisions. And with that, I believe I'll turn over to staff for a discussion in that area.
Great, thank you so much, Chair. Let me get my screen up here with a short presentation. I wanted to first, while I'm doing this, thank the committee members here because we, in the last month and a half, I think throughout October, November, there was 2 meetings with a robust discussion. A lot of really valuable feedback was shared, and that's helped us, continue to move this discussion forward. And part of what I want to share today is what has been shared with our Committee of Bar Examiners members, and then raise a couple of points of discussion where I think feedback is warranted at this time. So let me share my screen here, just one second. Okay. So I'm going to quickly just summarize some of the discussions to date. And then, as I mentioned, there's a few areas where I want to open the floor to discussion amongst the members. As a quick reminder, the initial draft introduced to the Committee of Bar Examiners in August incorporated, I think, a couple of buckets of proposed revisions to unaccredited law school rules. There were technical revisions and a consolidation of definitions, minor improvements to the format and style of the rule language. There was an integration of some guidelines into rules, really trying to make policies as transparent as possible by bringing them forward into the rules. There were the introduction of some rules that were introduced in the accredited law school rule set that have proven effective, or in which the language was worked out in that process and was ultimately deemed clear and appropriate to adopt for the unaccredited law school rules. And then there were more substantive revisions and new rule requirements, enhancement to the disclosure requirement language, the introduction of complaint policy. There was the introduction of a minimum bar exam pass rate similar to the accredited law school rules, and a modernization of the law school categories to reflect kind of the current landscape of the legal education space. And so these were the areas in which CS bars held those robust discussions in October and November. That feedback was incredibly valuable. What the Committee of Bar Examiners reviewed on Friday, December 6th, was a second draft that incorporated some of the feedback received by members here today. And just to spotlight a few of the, I think the more interesting ones to the committee members, there was a clarification of what principal instruction method meant. There was additional attempts to clarify the disclosure requirement language. We received feedback from members that major change requirements could be more descriptive, and so at least a few of those requirements have had additional language added. In direct response to feedback from CS BAR's members, the rule sets now include early termination and extension of probation for schools that can demonstrate a certain level of compliance. And there was some feedback that the student complaint record retention policy was maybe unclear as far as its scope. And so there's been an attempt to try to provide that clarity. Those were areas where the second draft incorporated some of the feedback received. What the committee also considered was the feedback that you all shared regarding these other issues. And so we were really appreciative that Dean Frickberg was able to attend the committee meeting on Friday and provide his own summary of the discussion that was had here at CS BARS. And then staff provided some additional summarization and shared your feedback with the committee members on these topics. Again, the new law school categories, the minimum pass rate for state bar exams, efforts to support retention and address attrition, and there was the discussion around standardized assessment. So we thank the members because that feedback was incredibly valuable, and I think the Committee of Bar Examiners members really benefited from hearing your thoughts on these topics. Now, following the discussions with the committee members, we feel there was two areas that were addressed at Friday's discussion that required some additional feedback from our members here today. So I wanted to open the floor to discussion on this first topic, which was kind of focusing our discussion around what an appropriate phase-in period for a new rule set would be. And before I open the floor, I just wanted to offer some initial thoughts. I think our most recent kind of reference point for this was the phase-in for the accredited law school rules, which I believe was a 2-year phase-in. And then I think we've tried on our end to kind of consider which rules would have operational impact for law schools and those that wouldn't, to try to maybe assess which parts of the rule sets could be introduced sooner than others if there needed to be different phase-in periods. So I offer some of these initial thoughts, but we really want to hear from you all what an appropriate period looks like, whether or not there needs to be different timelines for different rules. So I guess I'll leave it there, and I want to just open the floor to some initial thoughts.
Well, I'll begin, seeing no hands raised. My first thought, again, 2-year phase-in is the same as for the accredited schools as you raised. And although it's a shorter time period, I think for most of us on the administration side at schools, the safety, at least in my mind at that time period, and correlated to now for the registered unaccrediteds, is the waiver process. So there's already a built-in safety valve, I believe, in the rules for the registered unaccredited. So even if it is implemented in 2 years and there might be an outlier school or two, those outlier schools, if they're not fully compliant, can petition through that waiver process to the CBE for whatever they're not in compliance for. So that to me would then raise the question, from your side, on the staff side, do you see a large group of schools being out of compliance for the new proposed registered unaccredited rules?
That's a good question. I think the one that comes to mind is likely the minimum pass rate. And as we noted in our staff report to the committee on Friday, we believe, we have reported NPR figures from unaccredited law schools, and what that shows is all but 2 meet that requirement. So at least on that front in particular, the number of schools that would not be in compliance today is relatively small. I would love to hear from schools about maybe like the law school categories. I believe the law school categories are designed in a way, this new asynchronous and synchronous category, where schools' existing designs would kind of fit into one of those categories. So I don't think there's much work necessary to be done there. But I put a question mark on this presentation because I thought that might be an area where we might need to hear more from you all. Beyond that, I feel like the compliance with these other adjustments in the rules is likely met by most schools, except for where there's new requirements like the student complaint policy, in which some new written policy would need to be developed by each school.
And just one follow-up question for me on that same concept of phasing in, and I didn't see this addressed within the rules as currently written. If we add a new, again, right now we're conceptually thinking about all the existing registered unaccrediteds, but if we added a new registered unaccredited, how will they comply with the NPR until they've had a sufficient number of years of graduates? In theory, 9 years out from their start. So I don't know if that requires a separate phase-in conversation for those that are not currently a registered unaccredited school.
Yeah, that's a good question. Maybe I can call on Natalie. Natalie, how have we treated our new schools in the accredited category? It may not be something that's needed to be contemplated with the NPR in the accredited school category.
Well, it actually has not been an issue because every school coming forward has had at least a few years of graduates. So I think that is a novel question for a brand new school to set their expectations and also the type of support that the state bar could provide as far as milestones along the way. So that's something we could work on.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. I see Dean Amesqua has his hand up, please.
Yes. Well, I agree in part in the idea that, there could be many of these lower operational impact categories could be met. I do think that there's more discussion on how the state bar collaborates and supports the schools or vice versa on how we meet these requirements. For example, I think the student registration requirement is absolutely possible. However, I think it's been mentioned in several different venues, and I anticipate it being brought up again. This at the registrar's meeting is, this idea of what information can be shared to the law schools or can be, waived by the student to be able to be shared to the law school so that we can receive information quicker and things like that. So there may be a phase in time, maybe not 2 years, but to coordinate the operational process of those things and how we communicate. I also think if the state bar can already establish that schools meet the NPR requirement, there could be some, also expediting or changing of that process as well, so that instead of the state bar confirming numbers, maybe it moves the other way around, or some other ideas to make that process a little bit quicker and more regularly managed, especially now that we're reporting numbers at the mid-year level as well. So I think there's some things that, that present opportunities for communication and collaboration to change just some of the how we get to these things and how we actually comply with the help of the state bar.
Any additional questions or comments from our group? Not hearing any, Mr. Hunani, if it's helpful, maybe we can ask if there's a time frame for a phase-in that'll be recommended by the CS bars. Would that be helpful in this situation?
Certainly. We, as far as our staff reports to the community of bar examiners, have not yet made a recommendation, and that's, I think, part of what this conversation could inform. So I'd be happy to hear from members if there is a recommended timeline or number of years. Happy to receive that.
Thank you. So to our committee members, any discussion on what the phase-in time period should or could be? I already proffered the idea of 2 years. I don't know if there's any counterpoints, agreement, or if it's just not a discussable point where we have no consensus. Dean Yoshek.
It'll be short. I think that 2 year makes sense, given we've both schools and the bar have had experience with 2 years, and it seemed to have worked well, even though sometimes it felt like it was much shorter. But I think 2 years seems a reasonable.
James Bolton agrees with the 2 years, very definitely.
Thank you, Dr. Bolton.
Any other comments or thoughts?
Yeah,
Dean Marshall.
I would agree with the 2 years. I think that's reasonable, and in light of the comments you added to that as well, Jay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dean Marshall.
So we have 3 remaining members. If you'd like to make any comments for, against, or abstain.
I think the 2 years also would work well. I think it would also depending on where each unaccredited school is in their 5-year review cycle, or however when they're expecting their next inspection, as long as that's accounted for, so that if someone's having their review next year, they're at least can show that they're preparing for it, as opposed to having to establish that they've met it and what they're doing to meet it. That would be helpful.
And Dean Hunt.
The 2 years seems reasonable to me. I guess my feeling from looking at the revised rules is I'm not starting to see a lot of difference between the Cal registered unaccredited and the Cal accredited rules. They seem to be very similar. If a Cal accredited law school doesn't meet the NPR and their punishment is to lose their accredited status and come down to unaccredited, they're still subject to the same rule and regulation. So I'm not sure what the ramifications of that is, for that school.
And I wouldn't speak on staff side, but I've heard discussions from the CBE, the committee, where that same issue was raised. And I think member Kramer, I think you had discussed on that point, where potentially there could be a waiver issue. Because if every rule can be waived at the accredited rule or at the registered unaccredited rule, I think that would be the safety valve built into the system.
Yeah. Okay. And I guess some timeline to improve their performance.
Well, let me ask if there needs to be a safety valve. One possible policy outcome is that we don't want schools to exist who cannot meet the NPR. To protect students from spending a lot of time and money, to the extent those are different things these days, and failing to achieve the result. So, maybe we should have that chat as well.
Yeah,
Another option is a somewhat lower standard for the registered schools.
It might also be helpful to remember that for schools, while they are accredited, the state bar begins engaging with them even before they approach the 40% mark, in the hope that they can avoid doing so. And there is a probation process. And so far, the schools that have been in that place have had a period of at least 2 years of notice in order to bring that figure back up. And I believe it's contemplated that at least that level of support would continue.
yeah.
But another thing I think we noted at our recent last week's meeting was that this is an issue that takes longer to turn around than, say, certainly making adjustments to your student handbook, for instance. The test is only given twice a year, and so whether that might argue for a longer probationary period in some cases, I'm not sure. I think I also noted that there's only we talk about this, and Natalie just mentioned the bar working with the schools, but I don't see that the bar has a lot of tools beyond just saying, look, you've got to fix this, or you're not going to be able to continue teaching. And I think we need to note that, and the constraints on the bar, especially with some of the provisions in the recent P bill, are not arming it with more resources. They're probably reducing the resources it has available.
Fortunately, this year we've actually increased the number of programs that are available, and so far the ones that have been evaluated are showing impact. But also, this is a central function of the schools as well. The schools have a vested interest in helping their students to graduate and also to license. So we assume this will be a central focus of the schools and a central focus of their expertise.
No, we had a couple hands up, but they're both down now. So just double checking, just in case. So, Mr. Onanian, is that sufficient to help, at least for the feedback from CS bars? It appears the majority, I think, at least from my count, only one person didn't really commit either way. But it seems like the majority was supporting the 2-year proposal for a phase-in. And Dean Amesqua? Okay.
Yeah, that feedback is certainly helpful. And sorry, I saw Dean Amesco's hand go up and down, so no question there. Okay, just double checking. That's incredibly helpful. Then let's move to the next area. Part of our discussions in October, November was consideration of attrition and retention measurements. I think what we heard from members is that perhaps there was a preference for using attrition as part of a kind of a holistic assessment of law school's performance. And I think it certainly already plays a role in the state bar's assessment of a law school's compliance. One concept that came up during Friday's committee meeting was just to more explicitly identify that retention and attrition data is a factor considered in assessing a sound program of legal education. I think in practice that is already the case, but perhaps it can be more clearly identified as an important factor for the committee to consider. I think that organically then led committee members to think about the current data that we gather, and we offered to the committee some areas where there could be maybe some enhanced data. So we're able right now, due to the information we gather through the annual compliance reports, to provide kind of detailed attrition and retention data for 1L and 2L students, but perhaps data can be gathered for the entirety of a program, so you can get a sense of a student's completion rates. I think we've talked the committee members here have spoken to staff before about maybe some of the unique demographic identifiers that can be used to provide some additional nuance about student population at unaccredited law schools. We certainly heard from previous members that perhaps understanding which students are working professionals or caregivers, other situational information, that could be a new layer of detail. We also offered in our staff report the suggestion that perhaps the post-graduation employment survey could be improved so that it provides some more useful insights. So I think what we wanted to bring to the committee today is to kind of focus the discussion about retention and attrition measurements on recommendations for improving the data that we gather, and whether that's gathering more data or adding more nuance and color to the existing data. And I guess that also connects to, maybe hearing from members what kind of data they collect for their own purposes on campus that could maybe inform the State Bar as it explores opportunities to paint a clearer picture. So I guess I put on the table a lot of different options there, but generally the question for our committee members here is whether or not there are from your perspective, some opportunities to provide a clearer story about retention and attrition at unaccredited law schools using our data collection efforts.
So any questions, comments from our members? Dina Mesqua?
I definitely think one data point that is fairly low-hanging fruit could be voluntarily submitted by students, but I think you'd get a good sample size either way, is employment data. How many of the students work full-time versus part-time? Things like that. You may get more. There could be other personal issues that relate to attrition, whether it's taking care of family members, things like that. That might be a little bit more difficult to cultivate and to turn into actual, statistically significant information. But at the very least, working, if someone works full-time or part-time, or what their at the very least what their responsibilities are outside of class. And for most people, it's going to be, their other main activity is going to be employment, and I think that would be important to show, as well as the number of working students that attend these types of schools.
Dina Mesco, if I could ask, is that data that you would already be asking of your students when they apply or enroll, or would this be, if the State Bar were to request this information, would it be entirely new for your school?
We have them submit resumes, and our application asks them to indicate their current employer. So I don't think it would be out of bounds from information that we have. What we would do, however, is probably because we don't collect that data on an annual basis, but we could very easily survey our students to say what, if you're, make it optional, of course, but encourage them to, that is helpful statistical information that won't be identifiable. Just say, how many students do we have working full time? We could even get, different fields. That could be helpful and pretty insightful to show as a whole for the student group, group of students, is what fields are they currently working in the legal field? Are they outside of that kind of thing? And I think we would get, hopefully, we'd have to ask some of the other deans, but I believe we could get a good amount of response from our students of what they're currently doing.
Dean Hunt? You're muted.
Thank you.
James Bolton, I believe your second element, unique demographics and situational information, I believe that would be very helpful to reveal that information. Very helpful.
Well, Dr. Bolton, thank you for that input. I should note, we at the State Bar are already introducing situational information gathering. I'm using that term and it's a little amorphous, but the thinking being that we can learn more about our applicants' personal situations, whether it's financial hardship or maybe even the caregiver status, other information about them that's not typically kind of part of demographic identifiers, but tells us more about our applicants. So we've introduced this to a certain extent in some recent post-exam surveys. We're going to be doing more of that. But I think that it's included in this discussion because perhaps we can bring that over into some of the law school data as well. And Dean Hunt, I'm sorry, I think you were about to jump in as well. I'm sorry for cutting you off.
That's all right. Is Mr. Bolton done?
Yes.
Really a couple of questions and or issues.
Yeah.
Currently, there's no rules or regulations regarding retention or attrition for the registered or the accredited law schools. Is this something we're contemplating adding to the rules and regulations?
Well, I think to summarize the discussions that have happened here in CS Bar's meetings, I think in our last meeting in November, there was a discussion whether or not there should be a requirement to meet some sort of attrition or retention requirement. I think what we summarized as CS Bar's feedback and what we brought to the Committee of Bar Examiners on Friday was that there wasn't necessarily a consensus on what a appropriate measurement would be as far as like a threshold, but that there was again, a preference for attrition to just be one of the factors that is considered in assessing a law school's program of education. And that certainly is in some ways already the case. So what came out of the Committee of Bar Examiners meeting on Friday was to essentially just to essentially codify in the rules an explicit mention that the retention and attrition data is one of those factors, as it already is in practice. So as far as a new rule or requirement, I think that's as far as this discussion has gone. And then I think the second component is if there was any consideration of any future requirements, what's really needed is just more data and information to really make an informed decision. So it would be, I think at this point, I believe we would likely recommend just that explicit identification in the rules, and then explore some opportunities to try to improve our data collection and provide more information for the future.
Okay, because I mean, without setting any clear guidelines, then it leads itself to being arbitrarily applied here and there, or not applied at all, or applied in certain circumstances and not in others. And of course, you have to have some idea what the attrition rates are for both the registered, unaccredited, and the accredited schools, which my understanding is it is very high for everybody.
Well, and high attrition rates have caused some members of the CBE to get really upset. So,
but has there been any study done to see what the attrition rates are with both the registered and the accredited law schools? I know that I've looked up on the form that schools, that all the law schools post, the 61.7, where you can essentially discern every school's attrition rate, and they're high across the board.
Well, it sounds like you're suggesting that we determine an acceptable attrition level by reference to what's going on now. And I think what was motivating the board members that are concerned about it, and I'm one has some concerns, wasn't, you know, what's going on now is then assuming that's okay, but thinking that a rate, I think we saw one school with 90% at one point, and first year attrition, and that just didn't seem right. That was suggesting that a lot of people were being given false hope and made to waste a year's worth of tuition with no possibility of a positive outcome. And so, yeah, we're talking about two different ways of determining acceptability. I guess maybe I'd characterize your suggestion as what is the market accepting now, but and you know, letting the market decide is one approach that I also have some sympathy with, as long as the students know that a particular school, you know, has let in a lot of people that didn't make it past the first year, and they're willing to accept that risk. Maybe that's okay. But the counterpoint is we're also here to protect the students from wasting that time and money. It's a tough nut
Right.
to
But
crack.
there are certain barometers that can be placed on it. What degree of the attrition is occurring during the first year? If the school does have to sit, their students do have to sit for the first year law students exam, what success are they having on that exam? And then, of course, the NPR with what success they're having on the bar exam. It's one thing to limit the attrition taking place during the first year versus during the third year after a good deal of tuition has been paid. And the other thing I'll say is, I don't think it's fair that this attrition standard and or retention standard is only applied to the registered unaccredited, and not to the accredited. Because from what I have found, the accredited law schools attrition rates are pretty similar to the unaccredited. There's not a big gap at all.
Well, and I would, if we came up with something and approved it for the registered, I personally would be inclined to apply it to the accrediteds as well. Yeah, it's a tough issue, but one possible approach is to gather more data and see how things play out. I'll just say though, I don't think that because there's no explicit mention of it right now, that we cannot take into account attrition in our determination, you know, when we're inspecting a school and determining whether they're providing a sound legal education. That's a catch-all term, and I would prefer, whenever possible, to be more specific. But you know, a school that's attriting 95% of their first years makes you wonder if that really is a sound program. Because soundness is both the teaching, but also the initial admission selections. You know, they all are part of that equation.
I understand. I understand that. All right. Well, I'll send you the document that I've sort of put together, looking at the attrition for both the registered and the accredited schools. We can take it up further at a future point, but it is, well, what it currently is the market is what it is, and it's not, it can't be arbitrarily applied to the unaccredited and not the accredited.
Dean Hunt, before we move to another member, I'll just also note, I think this is an area where data has been one of the most important pieces of information to have an appropriate discussion. So I appreciate that you've kind of compiled some data as well. We provided to the committee of our examiners in our discussion on Friday some of the data that's part of the 2023 California Accredited and Registered Unaccredited Law School Performance Report, what we've called the Performance Report in previous discussions. And so I would just direct members' attention to that report as well. That's updated annually. And so we have several years worth of more detailed retention and attrition data up to 2L. So I think, part of the reason that this discussion is focusing around enhancing our data efforts is because we have found that incredibly valuable. And so if there's nuance or more that we can bring forward as far as information to drive this discussion in the future, we want to do that. But it sounds like you've done some of your own kind of data work. But I just wanted to point out that that's kind of the reference point that we've been using for our discussions as well.
I'll be sure to send it to you and the other members here of the committee. But it's on everybody's website. It's just there on that 6061.7 form. You can find every school's attrition data posted. It's there.
Just one point on that area. Again, if you're going to send it, I think our protocol, you have to send it to staff, and then staff can then disseminate it to all of us as any violations, which doesn't help any of us. And the communication is very helpful, though. I agree.
Yes. I will be sure to send it to staff and then go from there.
Thank you.
And next we have Dean Amesqua.
Yeah, all I wanted to say is kind of answering a few statements back of both Cody and Mr. Kramer, is that I do think that attrition is important. However, I want to be careful about going about those things the wrong way in terms of not doing the studying first and setting the line first and then doing the study second. I think that goes against everything we should be doing in order to really identify what the issue is if there is a concern. For example, if, let's say, 5 out of 6 students leave a school in the first year, but 2 of them end up transferring or starting at a new school because that particular school wasn't for them, or there was other extenuating circumstances. Is that attrition, or if students transfer, is that attrition negative to that school because they chose a different school but were able to transfer their credits, or things like that? Is the first year law students exam accounted for properly in the attrition numbers, which is what it's supposed to be? I think that the things that we're already putting in place for the unaccredited schools, especially the 5-year MPR, which I don't know that was a grassroots effort. I think it was a suggested item, and that we've kind of agreed to with the understanding that there should be some transition into this. But I do also, so I think with attrition, if it's going to be significant enough of a concern, the concern should also be where those numbers are coming from and what they actually mean. And I do think that the law schools can be helpful in helping define that to a pretty true standard of what somebody leaving an unaccredited school for whatever reason and how common it is, and those types of things. I think we've all seen these scenarios and really just want to have more about that discussion.
Thank you. And Dean Yoroshek?
I agree with all the prior comments about data being critical and doing some research. But garbage in, garbage out, meaning if the data isn't properly collected or defined, then we're not going to have the answers that we need. So, for example, retention and attrition are huge for all of us. And it's a great consumer protection as well for our students. And there's that balance that we discussed last time, that both the accredited and the unaccredited registered law schools accept and give people opportunities that otherwise would not have that opportunity. And so understanding why that particular student left. I saw in staff's report for the CBE that the changes in the first year law students exam was huge in terms of passage rate going to 33%. So that's going to have an impact on that attrition as well. That does a student leave because of finances, right? Did a student leave because of medical issues, or did a student leave because of academics? And really making sure that this is very specific about academics versus, life happens. In the last 2 weeks, I have had students who have had major medical issues that had to take a leave, right? That cannot continue. Has nothing to do with their academics. They were in great academic standing. And so I think being very intentional on what it means and those definitions are going to be critical. Thank you.
Can I ask about that of the group, but maybe you first. To what because I agree that somebody who simply decides that the law isn't for them, either it's they finally realize that it's not all what you see on TV. Although I think a summer clerkship will do a better job of teaching that. Or they get some other opportunity. How easy or difficult is it going to be to gather that data so we can put people in those different buckets? Because I wouldn't ding you for somebody who makes that decision,
right,
or has a medical issue. It's I'm fine with people, rolling the dice and deciding it's not for them. But
right. I know for
what
our
I'm most worried about is where people who have no real chance are, misled into thinking that they're going to make it out the other end.
So when a student leaves, they are asked on their form the reason, financial, medical, personal, academic, other, fill in the blank. And so we have that self-reporting, and depending on the situation, I may actually have a meeting with them. So the data is, I think, fairly easy to gather. The question and my concern is if this is going to be a rule and a factor, which I actually, I think retention should be a factor in how well a school is doing. It needs to be really well defined so that if this is written in a guideline or something, that it's, very specific that this is, for academic reasons, right? And that it's not just that 1L, as we discussed in last month's meeting, right? Beyond 2L, what's the retention in 2L and 3L? I think you'll find that it's probably 1% attrition, or compared to maybe 30%, I don't know, in 1L. So it's seeing the whole factor and being very intentional in defining when they're put into rules or guidelines. That's my main concern, is what's left for unclear and then interpretation. As you asked regarding the Bagley-Keene question, is that the AG's interpretation of the Bagley-Keene, or is that reality the Bagley-Keene? So that's my concern about if things aren't written clearly.
So it sounds like on the one hand, you'd like a kind of a specific standard, you know, if you will, a cut score. Um, but you're also describing things that are really nuanced. And so where I'm kind of leaning is we have a threshold that triggers a nuanced examination of the specifics of a particular school situation. And that's when we get into all the data information you have about why this person left and versus someone else. Does that make sense to you?
It does. I am not advocating for a cut score or a specific at all. What I'm saying is if it does come out that way, if that is CEB's decision, etc., and if that, then it needs to be very careful. I think a cut score is, again, I am not advocating for that at all. I think the MPE would suffice as that minimum standard. So I apologize if I came across as advocating for a specific requirement.
Okay, so now I'm hearing you say that you would like the standard to be clear that these personal decisions, change of career choice, are different and not necessarily they're not troubling to the extent that academic disqualification is.
Yes, yes, academic disqualifications, I think, can be a factor in what the school's doing or not doing, right? But we can't, as a law school, work with faculty, with students who are having medical issues, right? We can't help them with caregiving, etc., things that are outside of our purview.
All right, thanks. Anyone else have any thoughts about how hard it would be to be able to gather the information? So if there was a relatively high attrition rate, we could sort out what's causing it and determine if it really is a problem or is just a symptom of student decisions.
Well, I see both Dean Hunt and Dean Amesqua have their hands raised, but before we turn to them, I just want to be clear, you know, in our existing annual report data, we do gather attrition data, both academic and non-academic. So we have that layer of detail. Additional detail to Dean Yurishek's point maybe could be a useful addition, but I just want to make sure that we understand, we're all in the same understanding of what the existing data can tell us.
I was just going to make that point as well. I know in the annual report, we do report whether it's a non-academic or academic. I do not necessarily share Dean Yurishek's opinion that we could get other data points easily from the students who have left the program. So whether or not that's possible or not, I'm not quite sure. But I know a conversation I've had with members of the state bar is going to your more direct point, Mr. Kramer, is that we've admitted a student who's 42 years old and she's had 2 or 3 kids and she was in college 20 years ago. How do you ascertain her ability to succeed in law school other than admitting her to law school? Her college education from 20 years ago, whether they're outstanding grades or terrible grades, don't reflect her ability at 42 years old, having raised kids and whatever else work she's done over the last 20 years. Determining who can succeed in law school without admitting them to law school, how? The LSAT, that which I have generally thought is a fairly good barometer of who can succeed and who cannot. But Other than the LSAT, I don't believe there's any other barometer that can tell you who can do it and who can't, other than admitting them.
Are you familiar with that JD Now program that Natalie has mentioned? I may have the name wrong, but anyway.
That's a program that's designed to help students learn what study skills they need to succeed in law school. We do the same thing for our students. We teach them how to brief a case, how to use the IRAC writing formula, how to outline. Here's Quimby and Adapt the Bar and resources you might want to use as tutorials. That's all fine, but that doesn't tell you who can comprehend the information that they've been given, do the required analysis, and I think as important of all of this, develop the writing skills so that they can write at the law school level. There's multiple factors at play that cannot be determinative of whether or not the person will succeed or not until they're in law school.
And not hearing any additional comments and no additional hands up, just to readdress Mr. Hunanian's original question, a couple points. I'm definitely someone who favors data, but I want to make sure that data is always accurate. And I think in collaboration with staff, we can make sure our data is accurate. You know, as we do our annual reports, there's always little course corrections that I did not have. You know, people change names, self-identified categories, and it causes a good conversation to make sure data is accurate. I think data also has to be helpful. I think that's one of the areas that is the biggest point. What data would be helpful to a prospective student? And I think what is the academic attrition of a school in their first year or after their first year, I think would be helpful. You know, what other data? I'm not sure. But if that data is not helpful, we can gather it, but do we really need to go through that exercise? And then finally, and I think this is the major one I would be concerned with, at least in this context of the registered unaccredited schools, is it going to divulge personally identifiable information? Because the populations are so small, you know, within the registered unaccredited schools together, then even smaller within a specific school, are we going to be able to identify who someone is based on this data if it becomes public? Similar to the bar's current standard, if there's under a certain N value, they will not divulge pass rates on the bar pass or the first year law students exam. I think that would be a major issue as it relates to the registered unaccredited schools. Finally, back directly to Mr. Hunanian's question, you know, whether data do we gather I found helpful and useful? Disability status, not age itself, but age group, you know, generational, you know, alpha, millennial, X. I think that is helpful. Is English their first language? I think that's a very helpful one, especially when you deal with standardized tests. And sometimes when you have someone or English is their second or third language, just the subtle nuance of a standardized multiple choice question throws them off. Even though they're very intellectually gifted, they don't show it on, say, an LSAT or an MBE-like question or multiple choice question now on the bar. Also, I found very helpful, are they a caregiver? Are they a caregiver for children? And also in our current, you know, economic climate, are they a caregiver for their parents? And some are caregivers for both. You know, they're the sandwich generation taking care of their own children and their parents in the same multi-generational households. I think that's a very helpful one. We've discussed previously, are they first generation? You know, however we want to categorize first generation American, first generation college, first generation law school. You know, that's a difficult road for those individuals. I fell in that category. I had to learn a lot of things the hard way as I went through that process. And employment, not so much what are they doing, but the hour commitment. Is that part-time? Is that full-time? Or is their full commitment just law school? As one area of data I think is not helpful, and it's in our existing 6061, is employment after law school. Again, something we all publicize, we gather, we verify, but I think is not helpful for someone to evaluate a school just because of that survivor bias you see in a review document like that. When we send out a survey to graduates, we get survivor bias that those that are doing well are usually the ones that respond the most. And I think it's just bad data that's not helpful. But again, that just goes back to your original question. Just wanted to put that out there. Dina Mesqua.
Yeah, just to point out as well, I think because Cody referenced the law school the performance report, and it does have, attrition rates and academic and other reasons, and you can but it's only based on 1 year of 2021. So it might be helpful, I think, to show more longitudinal data, because I'm not sure how long that's been part of the annual report. But if you're pulling this from there, I think you could even do 2001 till today, to this year, and maybe have a little bit more information to show from that end. So it's also looking at the data you're already using and maybe trying to go back further, or at least post COVID. Now we're getting more and more years past that, which I think is a new kind of era for all of us in a lot of ways. So it can't be done based on 1 year, one circumstance, or one school. That's my main concern.
Mesco, you're right on time. We've been phasing in that data collection over a 3-year period, but even with the phase in, looking at some of the attrition for the unaccredited schools that have the additional 18 months for the first year law students exam, it does take quite a bit of time to build that data, but the type of trend that you're talking about is something that we aspire to and we appreciate.
So Mr. Hunanian, I don't know if that was helpful, if there's any other areas you'd like to delve in with our group.
No, I think that was incredibly helpful. We'll take this feedback back and continue to work with our subcommittee chairs, and our goal is to bring another draft back to the committee at the January CBE meeting, which I think, I don't have the date in front of me, but it's towards the end of the month in January. So that will be our next steps, and we'll take this feedback and consider it.
It's the 31st.
The 31st, perfect. Thank you so much. I appreciate the great discussion, though. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. So then we'll move on to our next and final point of business, discussion on committee work plan referral items from the CBE. And I'll turn over to our staff, Natalie Leonard.
Thank you, Dean Frickberg. I would make a suggestion. We have one additional topic, which is a quick update as to the Supreme Court's order regarding future bar exam changes. So I might suggest that we turn to that first and then use the remaining time for work plan, because work plan will be a continuing discussion throughout the CS Bars year.
Absolutely. Thank you.
With that, then I would suggest that we turn it back to Cody, please.
Thank you. Well, this is going to be an interesting discussion. As you all likely know, the Supreme Court issued an order for the state bar to begin thinking about kind of more substantive changes to the future bar exam based on some of the recommendations made by the Blue Ribbon Commission, some with modifications. I wanted to have this discussion here today at CS Bars because some law schools have already reached out to staff with questions, concerns, maybe ideas, and it's been incredibly valuable. But we wanted to bring the discussion here today to get some initial thoughts from our members. I started this saying I think this discussion will be interesting because this is something that is, I think, at the ground floor of discussion. So I likely don't have many answers for committee members, but I think it's my aspiration that we can capture as much of your considerations, questions, and concerns now so that they're included throughout the process. And of course, there'll be more opportunities for engagement on this topic, but we really want to engage you early. So let me just start with a quick primer. At the Friday Committee of Bar Examiners meeting, there was a discussion about the court order and about how the committee's role essentially of shepherding this process. So I just wanted to do a quick summary of that discussion just to give us a foundation. So on October 10th, the court released this order, which adopted some of the Blue Ribbon Commission recommendations with modifications. I think some of the directives that are of interest to our members here today. The new exam will test 12 topics and 7 skills for entry-level practice, and I'm going to list those in just a minute. Also of interest, there has been a direction for the State Bar to consider using some new technologies and perhaps even using artificial intelligence or other similar tools to create more of a simulated environment so that the future bar exam better measures skills, assesses practical skills. There will be an increased focus on assessment of those skills, like I just mentioned, along with application of the relevant knowledge, really a de-emphasizing of the need to memorize doctrinal law. There's also been, in that order, a direction for the State Bar to consider whether or not to adopt a bifurcated grading policy. This would be where an applicant who doesn't necessarily pass the full exam as it is designed today, perhaps passes the multiple choice component or the essay component independently and only needs to test the second component in the future. This is something that exists in the past, and so we've been directed to essentially analyze the impact of reintroducing that again. Again, there's an emphasis in the court order on fairness, equity, minimizing disparate performance based on race, gender, ethnicity. A lot of the principles I think we all share here. And the order also really explicitly identifies the Committee of Bar Examiners as the stewards for this process. And so at the Friday Committee of Bar Examiners meeting from December 6th, the committee began to consider how it would kind of organize its efforts to steward this process. I quickly referenced it, but here we have listed the 12 topics. There's 3 topics that the court introduced: employment law, family law, estate planning, trust and probate, as part of the directive. And we have here on the right the 7 skills that this future exam will measure and assess. And as you see, a lot of that, again, kind of practical skill sets. But I think the topic areas are of our particular importance to our law schools, recognizing that this will have an impact on their curriculum. So the Committee of Bar Examiners kicked off a discussion on Friday to just start to organize its approach. What was proposed but not yet determined or finalized was perhaps a 2-phased approach, with policy decisions being made throughout 2025, 2026, and 2027, and then content for the new exam being developed in 2027 and beyond. What was proposed, and again, not finalized at the meeting last Friday, was putting together a working group to make recommendations to the Committee of Bar Examiners and the Board of Trustees in the court as the process moves on. But these are the kind of 2 distinct phases that have been proposed as a way to maybe organize the committee's work around this topic. And I know, as I mentioned, what I've heard from law schools, a lot of questions about timeline, and we don't have all the answers yet, but I think what we brought forward as a potential timeline would be a steering committee guiding the work in phase 1 throughout spring 2025, from spring 2025 to winter or spring 2027. That phase 2 component, the content development component, beginning in spring 2027. In 2028, issuing the mandatory 2-year notice. So the State Bar has to provide at least 2 years notice if there are modifications to the exam that would significantly modify preparation for the exam. And I think we imagine this effort will do so. So there would be 2 years notice in 2028, with the new exam being administered in 2030 or 2031. Again, very much a very early timeline proposal, not yet finalized. But I think it's important to share with our law schools here that this is, an extended process. This is something that will take, several years to work through, perhaps. So I wanted to, again, to bring it to the committee today, recognizing that we don't necessarily have a lot of answers, but because some law schools have already reached out, willing to share their reaction or comments, we wanted to give members an opportunity. So I'm going to open the floor. I think I'm interested to hear some initial reactions to the order. I'm interested to hear if there's considerations that the Committee of Bar Examiners should incorporate into its efforts. For example, which experts to consult in phase 1 or phase 2. And frankly, any additional feedback or questions. The committee will be revisiting this topic at the January meeting. And so any of the feedback that we received today can inform that discussion. So a pretty open call for information, but I'm happy to leave it there and just take any responses to these questions or any questions that you may have.
Dean Hunt?
I think the idea of shifting the exam to testing skills, practical legal skills, away from brute memorization is a really good idea. I don't think the brute memorization is something that attorneys particularly need or use in their practice of law, but their ability to do research and draft memos off of that research, things along the PR exam, is a great idea and a fantastic direction for the exam to head in.
Great, thank you for sharing that initial reaction. I appreciate it.
Any other questions or comments from our committee members?
If I could direct a question, then I think one of the things that we're particularly interested in is we're considering, who can bring new perspectives to the process. Is this question about which experts can we consult? As I mentioned, there's a role for technology to play to help the State Bar assess these skills. There will be a need to develop appropriate assessments for this new approach, a way of assessing that we're currently not using in our current exam. So I know that's a somewhat open-ended question, but I wonder if there are perspectives as far as what kind of experts can be brought into the discussions to help bring some new ideas to the table, or at least to bring some informed ideas to the table.
Well, I'll throw out a couple of points while everyone else thinks, in case to encourage the conversation and thought. Initial reaction to the Supreme Court order didn't go far enough, but again, we have no control over that. The committee has no control over that. They definitely should have authorized the alternate pathway. Almost every state surrounding us has. And so the closer we can make this test similar to actual practice of law, I think the better. So to your specific last question, which experts to consult? Practitioners. I think they should consult practitioners. What are the job duties that lawyers are actually doing in the field? Those are the skill sets that should be tested. Those should be the people designing and discussing how do we grade them. I think there's been this huge disconnect historically in upper education, higher ed, that we sadly see culminating in the bar itself. Considerations for the CBE to incorporate in its efforts. My biggest concern just right now, the initial one, still processing everything over the past year that we've gone through in this process, I have a concern that the majority of students that go to accredited school and all students that go to registered unaccredited are on a 4-year pathway. And if they're on a 4-year pathway and they only have a 2-year notice of a change, it's that 2-year gap that I'm most concerned with. So if there's any way that we can encourage the CBE to first focus on the additional areas they wish to test, employment law, however they define that, family law, however they define that, is remedies now going to disappear, or does remedies become a lesser included within contracts towards and property? Just building out the domains of those new subjects so that way they can be incorporated even before the notice goes out for the 2-year change, I think would be exceptionally helpful in that process. I don't know if anyone else has any thoughts or comments in that area. Not hearing any. So,
I-
Mr. Hunting?
I would just say real quick, I agree with what everything that you said. I think if we're including practitioners, I think ensuring that we have, representatives from, a diverse, body of practitioners, while certain groups are very low percentage of actual practicing attorneys, there is value in bringing that perspective into it. So as long as, we bring in multiple perspectives in terms of those practitioners, that would be really, really helpful.
And just on that same point, my biggest apprehension in this conversation as we go forward, I'm apprehensive, will we have a future bar where we have AI creating the exam, then we have students using AI to answer the exam, then we have another AI program grading that exam. So it's taking the humanity out of it completely. And there's a lot of subtlety for those that do grading that we see that I don't think that AI can capture in the creation of the administration of an exam or in the grading of it, at least so far as I've seen and experimented with.
Yeah, we'll have to build a nuclear power plant to provide electricity for all. I haven't compared the current list to the new list, but is there a subject that's new? I
Employment
thought
law.
employment law. Okay, is that the one?
Yes. And family
think,
law,
Family law, family
property
law
was
for
also
only.
included.
And
Okay.
administrative law as well.
Oh, okay. Wow, it's because that sort of went against the Blue Ribbon Commission's attempt to reduce the subject areas. I think just as big an issue maybe for the teaching is going to be an emphasis on written communication skills, which is new. And when I go to calibration sessions and I see some of the work, I think that could be quite scary for some people. And then all the other things that don't relate to the subject area that we're not going to be testing on, that could be just as complicated as adding a subject or two.
I wanted to just point out, Chair Frickberg, I really appreciate the comment about the, I guess, kind of the order of operations opportunity here to try to make the impact on law schools, or to just try to make a smooth transition. So I just want to point out, that's exactly the kind of feedback that I think we're looking for. And I think we will certainly be engaging law schools to work on that particular topic, and I think other areas. So thank you for raising that, and we'll be sure to kind of prioritize thinking about that and when the time comes. And then, yeah, I guess I just wanted to point that out. So thank you for making that comment.
And Dean Marshall?
Yep, go ahead.
Yeah, did I hear you say that up for consideration was also a bifurcation in terms of the grading and the retake? Did I hear that correctly, that is up for discussion?
Yeah, so the order at least directs us to consider what the impact of adopting such a policy would be. And the state bar previously had that approach, and I don't know when that was when that stopped, so I apologize. So we have some research on the available to us about the previous policy, and we are currently working to kind of analyze existing bar exam data to make a sense of how that policy would kind of impact applicants kind of in today's contemporary setting. So anyways, I guess what I'm getting at is that I think the order is really for us to explore it and see what opportunities are there, and I don't think that work's really been done yet.
Well, I would second that opportunity and exploration. I wonder how much of the repeater drama and trauma is tied to, oh my God, I have to take this whole test again, as opposed to I just have to retake the written portion or the multiple choice portion or the performance test portion. And I'm wondering how many other states might do that bifurcated exam. I know I sat for the Texas bar exam back when it was 2.5 days, many years ago. And if you and the half third day was Texas civil procedure and criminal procedure, and that was specific like deadline rules for service and all that kind of stuff. And Texas had a bifurcated grading piece. I did not pass that half day. I did not know I did not pass that half day until I got the official notice in the mail. And I remember thinking there was no way I could restudy for that massive traumatic event. And then I only had to study for that half day. So I'm just wondering, now I probably would have stepped up like everybody else has to step up, but we do see such a low repeater success story. And I'm wondering if that bifurcation could be tied to that. And like I said, have you looked at other states, whether any other state employs a bifurcated testing process?
I don't know that answer. So if there's another staff member here who knows, definitely feel free to jump in. But the one thing I'll just offer to the group, like I mentioned, we're going to be conducting some analysis to try to make sense of this. But that previous research that the State Bar conducted several decades ago about this policy had some interesting findings, because at the time that policy was that a test taker who passed one segment of the bar exam but not the other could just take the other section or could choose to take both sections. And one of the findings of that research was that those who chose to retest on both sections actually performed better, because it was the section in which they typically perform better that really could get them across the finish line. That may not be the case anymore. That's why there's going to be some further analysis, but we need to look into it to really understand what the impacts would be. But you're thinking kind of in the right area, and we're going to explore that.
So Cody, we are approaching the 3 o'clock hour. Are there things that it is important to suss out before the next committee of bar examiners meeting?
I think this feedback really is sufficient. I'll just remind the committee here that, again, it's kind of the ground floor discussion. The committee of bar examiners will revisit the proposal in January, and then there'll be, I think, opportunities again for this body to discuss. I'm sorry, Paul, were you saying something?
No, I was, I'm in my timeshare and I'm talking.
Okay. So I really appreciate the feedback on related to both of these discussions. So thank you very much.
In Frickberg, before we close, might I just give a brief summary of the work plan topics so that it can be discussed productively in January?
Please.
Terrific, thank you. So as many of you know, the work plan for the committee for the remainder of the year was discussed at the December meeting. It includes topics that are referrals to CS bars. So we had intended to go through those. We did send out a tape cut of where you can find that in the CBE meeting, and also to ask the group if there are any additional considerations or topics that you would suggest that the committee consider adding to their work plan. And the committee noted in the discussion, as is always true, the number of topics they would like to complete that are meritorious can often be larger than the amount of time that is available. So sometimes a suggested topic is not taken up at the moment, but it might be due to capacity and considered in the future. So all feedback is welcome. We sent to the members of CS Bars the link to the video, but this is also available to the public. We encourage the public to also watch and give suggestions. And so we'll be reviewing this material and also taking suggestions at the January meeting. And I want to thank everyone in advance for their engagement and their suggestions. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And as this is our last meeting of the year, thank you everyone for all the efforts over the past year, and happy holidays and happy new year. And we'll stand adjourned.
Thank you, Dean Frickberg, for sharing.
Thank you.